Chapter 8. Please highlight and sticky note and mark for easy access Chapter 8. Chapter 8 covers control. Again, the .9 does an amazing job. It all stems back to the shot process. Chapter 8 will now continue and outline different factors of control for the end user. This would include trigger control, breathing control, workspace management, calling your shot, rate of fire, follow-through, malfunctions, and transitions to secondary weapons. Trigger control. 8-2, we have already talked about learning and implementing a good trigger reset for you and your soldiers. Breaking down the trigger control further would be prepping the trigger, pressing the trigger, your follow-through, and then resetting the trigger. If we need to view back on the video demonstration of resetting the trigger, this breaks it down even further. Moving forward into my shot process, in the shot portion is my trigger control. We will now talk about resetting the trigger. Most of you have heard how to reset the trigger. When I grasp the pistol grip with my firing hand and place my trigger finger naturally on the trigger, and I have made the conscious decision that I am engaging my target, and I have moved the safety selector switch to fire. As I am pulling the trigger straight to the rear without disturbing the sights, the weapon will discharge. Keeping the trigger pinned to the rear, the weapon will cycle. As I release pressure on the trigger, the end soldier user will feel and hear a metallic click. That metallic click is the trigger assembly resetting and now able to engage the trigger to the rear for the following shot. The end soldier user should not, at any time during the IWQ, release their finger off of the trigger, or more so outside of the trigger well, unless they have finished firing, in which you would move the safety selector switch to safe and keep your finger straight and off the trigger. By being able to repeatedly have a consistent trigger pull without adding additional muscles and movement, the end soldier should be able to have a more consistent trigger pull with less disturbance of the sights. Continuing in the .9 in Chapter 8, subsection 8-4 would be breathing control. The breathing control visual aid described in the .9 demonstrates a soldier's ability on breathing in, breathing out, holding their breath, and then continuing their breathing process. Like I cannot emphasize enough, leaders, soldiers are different. Our lung sizes are different. Our bodies are built differently. I don't care where you break your shot in your breath control, as long as it is the most stable for you and your soldiers at the end level. I want you to be able to consistently and repeatedly hold your sights steady on target and engage your target as steadily as possible. Some soldiers, annotated on the visual aid, are more stable when they breathe completely in and break the shot with a breath of oxygen flowing through their body held within their lungs. Some soldiers prefer and are more stable upon breathing completely out and holding, exhaling all of the oxygen outside of their lungs. Some soldiers like to breathe in, breathe halfway out, hold, and then break their shot. Again, I don't care and the instructors don't care, and you at your unit should not care. One thing that I do not like to hear when marksmanship instruction is being taught at the unit level or throughout the United States Army is you need to do it this way because I do it this way. If we all stood up and held our hands together, our hands are different sizes. Our bodies are different sizes. Our kit is manipulated different ways because we are right-handed and or left-handed shooters. Some shooters are right hand, right eye dominant. Some shooters are left hand, left eye dominant. Some shooters are cross-eye dominant, and I feel bad for those individuals. However, some of them are the best shooters I've ever met in my life. You, as leaders, need to determine what is most repeatable for you and your soldiers to ensure consistency. Calling your shot. As described in the video for Sergeant Fulmer demonstrating getting behind the gun and building his shot process and building his position. We had talked about these weapon systems being able to shoot 1 minute of angle. If we are controlling and managing and mitigating recoil, I want you to think of your sights as my arms. And you should be so hard into that gun, utilizing the magazine dug into the ground as a monopod support. You should be pulling with your support hand and pulling with your firing hand on the pistol grip back into your shoulder, while also rolling your shoulder into the weapon system hard, that weapon system should be so stable upon when firing, the recoil viewed through your sights should look something like this. You should not see your sights fly up and lose sight of the target downrange. It is different when we are talking about a secondary weapon system or your pistols that is harder to control. But the length and weight of the weapon systems that are issued to you currently with the M4, you and your soldiers should be able to get behind that weapon system so securely that the managing of recoil should be as nil as possible. Viewing the description in the visual aid, when I have made the conscious decision to engage my target and my sights are aligned through the visual aid on target, as I begin my shot process, and I am now in the shot portion of my shot process, and I am squeezing the trigger straight to the rear without disturbing my sights, when my weapon discharges, I need to have enough mental and visual clarity, consciously viewing my sights and where they were when the shot broke. If my shot broke and my sights moved, expect your point of impact to be where your sights were when the shot broke. Continuing through the shot process in the .9, it goes through follow-through. This covers calling your shot, evaluating your shot, recoil management, recoil recovery, trigger, sear reset, sight picture adjustment, engagement assessment, subsequent engagement, supplemental engagement, sector check, correct malfunction, and restart your shot process. The follow-through that you and your soldiers need to do on the individual level during the IWQ needs to be implemented during your follow-through. This is the completion of your shot process. You have engaged your target or targets. This list may seem long, but you as leaders must understand that we are implementing all of the following topics in follow-through. Once you have called your shots and your sights are on target and you break your shot, you should know if you were high, low, left, or right. You need to evaluate that shot by visually inspecting to see if your target has engaged, been hit, and fell. You need to manage that recoil as to ensure that your sights are being moved to the next target. You need to reset your trigger for the next target. Your sight picture needs to be adjusted to the next target. Your engagement assessment could be done through your peripheral vision and seeing your targets fall. Subsequent engagement is engaging multiple targets at the same time during that course of fire. During the IWQ, you will have 1 up to 4 targets available to engage at one time. For Table 6 live fire record fire, you will have 4 seconds per target. Sector check. You need to ensure that you are staying in your lane and your lane only during the IWQ. If you have a malfunction, you need to correct that malfunction and then restart your shot process for the next target engagement. Shooters. Before in the lesson in the Marksmanship Academy, we had talked about how pertinent it is that these weapon systems are not free-floated barrels. This video will describe barrel flex and what happens when we apply unwanted pressure to the weapon system from the D-ring forward and how that will impact your point of aim versus point of impact downrange.
Hey Marines, this is Staff Sergeant Ferguson with the Marine Corps shooting team, and we're going to be covering the phenomenon of barrel flex. So barrel flex is anytime you're taking an outside force and putting it on your handguard or the barrel itself. Some examples of when we induce barrel flex are when you're on the rifle range and you're putting your sling on and torquing down. You're either pulling down on the barrel or pulling off to one side or the other, depending on whether you're right-handed or left-handed. Another good example is when you go to shoot off of a barricade, they're pushing down on the barricade or the sandbag, and now you're inducing a upward barrel flex. Barrel flex is such a big deal now because we're using a single reference point sighting system. Anytime you push up or down or left or right on your barrel or a handguard, now your barrel is moving without your sight seeing a difference. Back when we used to use iron sights, it was a dual reference system. So you could take your front sight and your rear sight. If you applied any pressure to the front of the gun and the barrel moved, the front sight moved with it. Then you would realign your sights, take the shot, and it was a very minimal adjustment. Alright, so we've done some tests in the past, and we've taken M16A4s and M4s. We took a magazine, securely fastened it to a barricade, rested the mag well on top of it so that there was no interaction from us. From there we shot a control group of 5 rounds at 200 yards, and then we started gradually hanging weight on the front sling swivel. We started with 2.5 pounds and increased it to 15 pounds. With the M16A4 at 2.5 pounds, we got 4 inches of shift at 200. Then at the max that we did 15 pounds, which increased it to 30 inches at 200 yards. Now, using an M4, you receive less barrel flex because of the shorter barrel. And at the same 200 yards, we got 15 inches versus the 30 of the M16A4. So, a couple different ways that you can mitigate the barrel flex. One of the things that we can do is do hard on soft. So, what that is if you were to put a part of the rifle on your hand in order to help get a good position but still mitigate the barrel flex that's in play. Something else that you can do is to get a weapon system like the IAR where it has a free-floated system. The only way that the handguard is connected here is at the receiver itself. Nothing else on the handguard is touching underneath. The barrel itself is not being touched anywhere inside until it gets back to the receiver itself. So now if I bring the barricade over and I utilize this as a support, I can push down on it as much as I want, and it's not going to affect the linear relationship between the optic and the barrel itself.
All right, students, so continuing into the .9, still staying in Chapter 8, 8-8. Please, this is one of the things that you may want to mark moving forward. The Army has changed some policies regarding malfunctions. And so as you can see in the visual diagram, in your .9s, this is an amazing visual aid. It talks about what to do for you and to teach your soldiers at the unit level, if they experience a malfunction, what type of function it may be, and how to correct that malfunction. Essentially, there are two separate ways to correct a malfunction. There's immediate action and remedial action. So looking at our graph here, if your weapon system does not discharge and there is, as it states, no bang, we need to see if the bolt is in battery, right? If the bolt carrier group and the bolt within the bolt carrier group is seated in battery inside the weapon system. If you receive a click, right, where a firing pin has dropped and the weapon is trying to discharge, right, we're going to go into immediate action. If we have a mushed or dead trigger with no audible and mechanical click, we need to perform remedial action. This may be a little bit confusing for your junior soldiers and for yourselves, especially under timed and under pressure for the IWQ. It's a very fast weapons qualification, and you don't get a lot of verbal commands except for fight up and or possibly just weapons free, and then it is on you and your soldiers to complete the IWQ and correct any malfunctions using immediate or remedial action. Going back to the graph, if the bolt is in battery and we get an audible and physical click, we will perform immediate action. Who here has heard the term sports? That used to be a term that is still used. There's nothing wrong with that term, but this takes some of the actions out that may not be necessary to get the gun back up and running. Performing immediate action is tap, rack, reassess. What I mean by that, I will visually demonstrate. So if you receive a malfunction and I go to engage and I hear an audible click, I will tap the magazine up into the weapon to ensure that it's fully secure and seated. I will rack the weapon system, and then I will reassess and continue engaging. If that does not fix the problem, we need to move into remedial action. For myself and you and your unit SOPs, this will change, and you need to determine when and where and how you're going to communicate with the soldiers to the left and right of you if you have a malfunction and a gun down, and I am now conducting immediate or remedial action, and I am getting this weapon system back up. For myself, during the IWQ, most issues that we see for malfunctions will and can be solved by tap, rack, and reassessing. If that does not work, I will try it one more time quickly. Tap, rack the weapon system, and reassess. If it doesn't fix it the second time, we need to go into remedial action. So what I need to do is I need to look at the weapon system and see if I can visually identify the problem, what that is. Some examples would be a stovepipe, a double feed, bolt override, or charging handle impingement. If you can visually identify the malfunction, the first thing that we need to do is remove the source of feed. And sometimes, based on the malfunction, the magazine may not be able to come out as easily. So we are going to engage the magazine release and strip the source of feed away from the weapon system. I will then lock the charging handle to the rear, forcing the bolt to the rear if I can, and continue to make this weapon system clear by any means necessary. Once the weapon system is clear from malfunction, reinsert source of feed, bolt forward, and continue the IWQ.